we'd like to start upon this stage with a panel discussion, very interesting session, because we'd like to show you about the goal view of entrepreneurship education across a very different country. And it's the time for the topics of Gen at Startup Thailand panel discussion on educating and cultivating startup through entrepreneurship education. And I would like to invite our honorable speaker join with us upon the stage. First up, we are honored with the present from founder and CEO of Venture Health Matrix. Please welcome on stage Dr. Susan Amat. Welcome. Second up on stage, Professor in Trinity for Teaching Entrepreneurship. Please welcome Mr. Johannes Lindner. Our class today, to make you go inside through all together, our distinguished moderator, Managing Director of Chen Taiwan and co-founder of iiiNNO. Please welcome Mr. David Kua. May I pass the stage to you?
All right, Sawadee Krap. Good morning. All right, so excited to be here to have Susan and Johannes here. We are friends for about 2-3 years. But just before starting, we would like to ask the audience some questions. Who are startup here? Entrepreneur, startup? Great, great. Who are the incubator, accelerator, or service provider? Great. We'd love to have you guys in the room. And of course, the policymaker, the government people. Raise your hand. Maybe you can ask your friends to raise a hand for you too. All right. So, very shy audience. Okay. So we got about only 20 minutes. Okay. So we're going to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce who they are, what do they do, and what's the relationship with entrepreneur education. You all have about 60 to 90 seconds. Susan or Johannes? All right.
Okay, my name is Johannes Lindner. I'm from Vienna, from Austria. And I'm a head of the Department for Entrepreneurship Education, and we have developed a program which started with 6-year-old kids, and it's going from primary education to lower education and to upper secondary education, and it's also inside the university for the teachers. And it's a large program. It's not only running in our country, it's also running in Slovenia, in Portugal, in Bulgaria, partly in Denmark, and so on.
All right, great. Susan?
Hi, I'm Susan Amat. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 15. I'm one of those troublemaker type people. I started a program 10 years ago at the University of Miami called the Launchpad, which was focused on building individuals within university contexts. We replicated that all over the world as Blackstone Launchpads. Then now I started a company called Venture Hive, which is focused on high growth businesses, and we create software and content to fuel accelerators, internal corporate accelerators, and government programs and universities all over the world. We've now worked with entrepreneurs from more than 60 countries.
That's amazing. So the next is, I believe, some of each of the panelists, you have something prepared to share everybody. Maybe Johannes, you have a slides up. Yep. So we have about 3 minutes, okay? 3 minutes.
That's fine. Okay, that's this. Maybe I'm going back. I will speak about a program which is called YouStart. When you want to take a look at the website, you find it there. When I make a speech in Austria, I always start with mountains. Our country is 80% of the countries are mountains. And when you want to bring the people that they should make something with entrepreneurship education, you have to say to them they have to see a wider view. Why should they start so early? And we have a so-called TRIO model, what we are using. And the TRIO model has 3 aspects. The one aspect is that we say the core entrepreneurship education means you have to develop ideas and you have to cultivate that you are able to realize ideas. The second step is that you have to empower the people. And the third step is that you need to do something for the community. That's the 3 levels of entrepreneurship education, which in our state is also the official definition of entrepreneurship education. The second step, what we were doing was we have a reference frame for entrepreneurship competences, starting with A1, with primary education, is going up to people who take over a company. It's a mass of data just to see it for orientation. And that is our program. We are learning through challenges. And challenges through all the different levels. It's a very scalable product. And just to show, this is the program for the primary education, how it looks, that we are using a small mouse. We do not call it their startup program, Youth Start program. We call it Levi. It's for a small mouse. It's the name of the small mouse. And our kids in our country love it, and we know it because it's the largest field research in whole Europe. Therefore, we have a lot of data, and we know that it's efficient, it works. Yeah, we have one particular program. We have a certification program for entrepreneurship schools, where in our country, 15% of all schools are participating. It's a very intensive program because it means that all teachers in the school committed that they will do something with entrepreneurship. Yeah, that's a short introduction. I think it was less than 3 minutes. That's fine.
All right, great. Susan, it's your turn. 3 minutes.
Thank you. So leaving the university environment, it was really important for me to look at that point when I left the University of Miami, I had worked with hundreds of different entrepreneurs, from alumni, faculty members, focusing on changing their mindsets to understand commercialization. So with Venture Hive, we started on something very different. We ended up with 5 different levels of programming. The first level being kind of an ideation, do I want to be an entrepreneur theoretical program, which we've done with high school students, college students, transitioning veterans from military, but also within corporations. Level 2 is idea to MVP. Level 3 is you already have a commercializable product. You typically are pre-revenue to like $1 million in revenue. Level 4, you're already in several countries and you're focusing on the process and systems and structure to be able to scale properly. And level 5 is you're usually at 10 million plus in revenue, and now you're going outside of what hemisphere you're in. You know, if you're in Asia, going into Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, US, understanding that localization of your product, service, team, etc. The core of what we do, though, is build people so they can build their businesses. We don't have a fund, we don't take equity, we're an education company. And that was a really important decision from day one to make sure we have no conflicts of interest. This is about building out the systems and process to train service providers, whether they're universities, accelerators, VCs, corporates, to really ensure the personal development to help people become value creators and be able to execute on the wonderful ideas they have. That's really the big challenge. As you start seeing ecosystems grow and entrepreneurs building great companies, when it starts getting really valuable, a lot of times their investors want to replace the founding team because they were wonderful to start, but they aren't the right people to scale. We end up working with a lot of people who are at $1 million plus in revenue, who have 500,000 plus in investment, and they're at that pivotal stage where they're getting ready to really be able to scale, and they need the executive development, they need the process and systems to be able to be the people who can continue running the company as they grow, and not have the investors wanting to bring in professional management. So the concept here is we work with companies all over the world to test and validate content, and then we train others to be able to run programs at scale, localized to their context, so that their companies can't just be great idea people who start, but can be the same team that scales, creating local jobs, creating a very different mindset around what's possible for a community, and then creating the people who become the investors and mentors for that community to build the next generation.
That's super. That's super. So I think the audience, they probably want to know a bit more about during running of your programs, what are the issues and opportunity that you actually currently face? So maybe everybody can spend about 1 to 2 minutes to talk about the actual case. What are the issue and opportunity that you see what you're currently doing? Maybe Johannes?
Maybe I'd like to explain why you should do entrepreneurship education. And normally I have 4 or 5 explanations for this, and not everybody is open for each of the explanations, but one of them should fit enough that you want to do entrepreneurship education. The first one is, it's about social inclusion. We know that 20% of the kids are learning entrepreneurship at home. They get socialized in that way. 80% of them will not learn it at home. When we will have a society where a lot of people are able to participate, we need to do this inside the regular hours in the school. First explanation. Second explanation is, it's maybe not fit for Thailand, but for China for sure, for Austria, and for even the most European for sure. We have a situation in the families that an average family has only one kid. 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 6 persons who love one kid. That's the way that your kid will get independent. It will be served the whole time from their parents. That's the generation of princes and princesses. And therefore we need to change this, because kids normally like to be proactive. When you serve them, they also will accept this. With 15, then you will have the perfect consumers. Third explanation. It's the ecosystem explanation. When we want to have people who are trying something new, it's like when you want to train people that they should play soccer. You start quite early. And with 15, 16, then they will play really good, and then you can support them. They will not start with 15, 16 to play perfect when you not trained them before. That's not a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the fourth explanation is that an economy or democracy is working well is not an automatism. But all employees and entrepreneurs of the future just at the moment are in the schools. And when we want to create a society where we have the feeling that everybody see that he could be a change maker, we need to do this inside the school system. Thanks a lot.
All right, Susan, your take on issues and opportunity in what you're currently doing?
Well, I think one of the key things here is understanding the big picture around why build people. And I think one of the previous speakers, Andrew from Think Big, said it very well. We invest in people. And this is the challenge. Many, especially in emerging ecosystems, they're so focused on the business model and technology, and in reality, you can have the best business model and incredible technology, and the team can still fail miserably. So you can always fix the business model, as almost everybody who's ever worked in any kind of business knows. You're pivoting constantly as market conditions change, etc. You can fix technology. In fact, most of us start with an early stage MVP, and we're constantly adding to it. It's never done. But the team is very challenging to fix if they aren't ethical, honest people who are focused on creating customer value every day. They have to be focused on revenues, customer validation, and creating value for that customer. So there's a long-term engagement and long-term revenue. That's it. And when you don't have the understanding, I mean, a good VC is not just looking at technology. And if they are, they're doing a technology grab, and great, that's wonderful for you. But when you're really doing strong investment, and when the ecosystem is further along and you have a variety of investors looking at the long-term capabilities of their investment opportunity, it really comes down to doing diligence on, yes, the technology, the business model, but the company, how it's being run, the systems and processes that are being put in place to scale, because that's where real value lies, and the team who's going to execute on it. And a lot of times we can get away at an early stage with a super passionate leader who's super exciting, and you're investing on that jockey. But in reality, their ability to then manage a team as it scales, put together people who aren't their cousins and brothers and best friends, but really the right people who are always going to be in learning mode too, that's a really tough skill set, especially if you're a cool tech guy who may not necessarily have the best management skills. So making sure that you build people and that team who are constantly looking to learn and improve themselves, seeking the ability to be mentored in a long-term way. And unfortunately, the startup world has bastardized the term mentoring. So unfortunately for all of you, my PhD dissertation was on mentoring for innovation. So I'm very into this. Mentoring is about a long-term relationship to build a person to be able to execute on what they're doing. It's not somebody who comes in for half an hour telling you what you should do in your business. So the very nature of what happens in a lot of these programs is flawed from the beginning, because it's all about being able to tell the story or build a business model, but not if those people can execute on any of the stuff they're saying in their pitch that sounds wonderful. So, you know, going back to your actual question, the opportunity really is about changing the mindset of the entrepreneur to be accountable for their own learning, to build themselves at a faster rate than they build their business, so that they can be responsible agents of that investment or of that promise or of that hope and dream of the community or their clients in creating value for them. And if they're just focused on the short term and not building these long-term relationships based on their ability to execute, it's going to be a big challenge for a community because the corporate that gives that startup a chance is not going to give that other startup a chance if they have problems in execution. The investment, the VC who tried a very early stage investment, if it was too hard to manage them and they lost their money, is going to be much more careful in their next vetting of the next startup. So it's up to all of us to make sure that when these ecosystems are starting, that everybody is working honestly and ethically towards building real value for a customer versus just getting investment and being able to have a lot of Twitter followers.
Great. From my personal experience, we are also an international incubation center with acceleration programs. So we've been doing the education, and then there's always this question about people, right? So I think we want like about 30 seconds touch on this because we have a lot of more questions coming on. Is when we talk about entrepreneur education, we're talking about people. So is more focused on coaching the abilities or building the characters? 30 seconds. Sorry, I'm putting everybody on the spot.
We are working in the long term. When we start with kids with 6 years, of course, it's a development of mentality. But of course, it's connected with parts like knowledge, with parts like qualification, but of course with passion and fire, which is developing the mentality. But I think it's a good combination when you offer all of them.
Okay.
From my opinion, only empowerment program is not an entrepreneurship program. It should also include other parts.
All right, Susan, building characters or teaching skill sets? I know it's a tough one.
It's both. And part of the challenge is what entrepreneurs think they need is usually not what they actually need. So almost every early stage entrepreneur is saying, I need investment for whatever, and they're not even really clear of how the money will be spent and why and how, because a lot of them haven't even worked out exactly who their customer is and what the business model is going to be. So I'm a very big believer in making sure that entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, if you're in a big corporate, it's the same thing. It's not about cool technology. It's really solving a problem and understanding exactly what you need to be able to solve it at scale. And then you seek investment, you get buy-in, etc., because you've already done the research up front.
All right,
so
great.
It's both.
We have about 3 minutes, and we have probably about 5 more questions. So we're going to see how we're going to squeeze in. Role of governments, role of private sectors in entrepreneurship educations.
The role of the government, it's a question where you're offering entrepreneurship education. When you say it should be a part in the school system, in the regular school system, of course the government has a role. And it has to find the way that it's a regular part in the syllabus, that there is enough time that the students can do experimental learning, because it's particularly important that you also have a different way of learning, and that you have the equipment which is needed. The role of the companies, in my opinion, is particularly important too, also when it's inside the regular school system, because the entrepreneurs should be a part of the program. There should be several times arrangements where entrepreneurs are involved. We have fostered this a lot. When you work outside the school, in informal sector, you find a lot of nice programs which are totally run by communities and companies. Some of them for free, some of them get sold, some of them are online courses. It's always a question of the target group. In my opinion, when you are a successful entrepreneur, you have created a value, but you can also give a value back and give this as a role example for the community. And that's an important thing. And we are doing this immediately also with the youngsters when they have to feed back to the other kids.
All right, Susan?
I think it depends on the level of government we're talking about. In many of the countries we work, the #1 role of the government is to make sure that the policy, the laws allow for very quick development of companies, bankruptcy laws, all of these pieces to make sure that entrepreneurs can get to business and create value as quickly as possible and test and validate what they're doing. So that's number one, making sure that regulations stay out of the way of progress and value creation. We have incredibly strong relationships with our state and local government as well, and our school system as a government entity has allowed us to be able to adopt anywhere between 5 and 20 high school students every year to spend half of their school day with us interning in our startups. I mean, there's all kinds of really cool things when you're just allowing people to learn through experiential learning versus more of a structured curriculum, which I believe in very much as well, but having that flexibility so that there's always an experiential learning component to everything, I think is very key.
Okay, I'm going to ask the organizer to give us 3 more minutes. Ken? Okay. So is there any question from the audience? I know there's a lot of people want to ask questions.
A lot of people,
I know, a lot of people want to ask questions. Andrew want to ask a question, right, about entrepreneurship education?
You guys, this is your chance to ask questions of 2 academic people who are also entrepreneurs. This does not come along often.
All right, so the question is, how do you train or educate entrepreneur to embrace failure? That's a very good question. 20 seconds only.
I'd like to answer this question with an example. You know the sports ski springing, ski jumping? They are jumping around 100 meters or longer. And everybody would say in the beginning, oh, that's very risky, or it's very risky. When you ask a ski jumper, he will say to you, it's not risky, because he knows the risks. And therefore, he can handle it. But he started to learn it when he was 3 or 4 years. He made a very small jump, and then they made a lot of failures and realized how they can make the next one and improve them, and then they were able to jump 100 meters and know that it's not that risky. People outside would say, it's unbelievable, they are just adventures, they are crazy.
All right, Susan?
So I love the idea of being able to work with people for 20 years to prepare them for failure, but in reality, we have a lot of people who come to us who have millions of dollars and invested in them, and then they crash and burn. The question really comes back to a couple of things. Number one, we train entrepreneurs to be data-driven and unemotional in their decision-making process. Because when you know how to do research and if everything is tied to if you're creating customer value or not, things get pretty clean pretty fast. There's no rose-colored glasses that keep most of us going. So it's about doing everything in a series of experiments focused on data. The data drive decision-making. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't focus very much on helping people calibrate their gut instincts, but in reality, your gut takes you so far, but if you don't have cash, you will die. So it's really about making sure people are making the right decisions for their business based on customer value. And if you do it through a set of experiments, there might be lots of experimental failures, but only through the experiments can you get to the end goal of really the learnings you need to be able to solve the structure and framework of culture of experimentation and learning.
All right, one more minute, and thank you, Andrew, not to put you on the spot. Your speech in the morning was great. All right, 10 seconds. What do you want to say to entrepreneurs who are really doing something but nobody believes in them from an education perspective? 10 seconds.
Yeah, I would say that the same example like before. In my opinion, when you want to have a next generation of people who are changing the society and develop the society, you need to start immediately in the schools. Because it's not enough if 5, 6, or 10% of the society have the feeling that they can change something. You need a much more higher percentage.
So start early, start in schools.
It's my clear opinion.
So I'm going to talk to that little group of people who admitted they were entrepreneurs, which means you're the crazy people here. Welcome to our club. Okay. The number one thing, yeah, stop it, David. The number one thing,
the clock is running.
We're already so over, it doesn't matter anymore. The number one thing you need to focus on, when nobody believes in you, you have to define who nobody is. If it's your family and your friends who just may not be risk takers, that's okay. mitigate the information that you share with them to be able to manage them properly. Don't say how frustrated you are. You have to be totally persevering. Things are great. We're working on stuff. But don't tell them how hard it is, because it's going to suck every single day for a long time. But if the nobody who believes in you are people who might be your customers, then you have to really take a step back and listen to them. And don't fall in love with what you're doing. Fall in love with understanding that you have to deeply understand what problem you're solving for them and how much value you're creating for them. And if you're not obsessed with solving their problem, which may change over time, you have to be ready to continue to pivot and add to your product or service solution, but listen to them and solve their problem. And if they don't believe in you, go back to the drawing board.
All right, great. So start early and define who that nobody is. So once again, thank you so much. I love the audience. Thank you, Johannes. Thank you, Susan. Thank you.
Thank you, you guys. Well, you locked the stage as well, and thank you for making this panel discussion so interesting as well. And I take a bow to you, Mr. David Cook. You make the stage so fun. Yet, because we understand that the time is precious for us, so we count by seconds and a minute as well. ทุกท่านคะ